Amen. Well, welcome everybody. My name's Jeremy. I'm one of the pastors here, and I am glad that that the Lord has brought you here today, and I trust that He has. And if you have a Bible, I would encourage you to turn to the book of John. Actually, we've been in 1 John, and we wrapped it up, and now we're going to spend the next few weeks in the book of John. Actually, we're going to be looking at kind of a big scope of the book of John, and so we're going to be looking at, that's appropriate that we sang that song, because we're going to be looking at the 7 I am statements of Jesus in the book of John. And Jesus makes these I am statements. He says something about himself in each one of these. That I am statement really comes from when God is talking to Moses, right? And God says to Moses, I am. And when someone asks you who's talking, just say I am is talking, because God is everything, right? He is in charge of everything. He is over everything. He made everything, and so he doesn't really have a name. He just is I am. And so that's what we just sang about, and we're going to be looking at these passages where Jesus says, this is who I am, okay? But as you guys are turning to John chapter 6, I wanted to introduce you to a man named James Smith. James Smith he graduated from Bloomfield High School in Bloomfield, Connecticut in 1995. But he found his true home in Mount Vernon, Ohio, when he graduated from Mount Vernon Nazarene University with a BA in youth ministry in 1999. He made his way there 4 years prior and had graduated with that degree. And 1999 was a pretty good year for James. Not only did he graduate from college, but he met the love of his life and married the love of his life, Kelly, in that same year. And then after about a 5-year stint in youth ministry, James eventually found his way back to Mount Vernon and Mount Vernon Nazarene University, where he has served as a variety of different roles for the last 11 years. And then he and Kelly, they are in love with their 4 children, Haley, Judah, Finn, and Asher. Kelly has the blessing of working from home. She is a writer, and so she's able to work from home, and she can be a full-time mommy to her kiddos. James and Kelly are devoted members of Lake Home Nazarene Church there in the Columbus suburbs, where James has the opportunity to preach from time to time, in addition to serving in other roles or preaching in other churches from time to time as well. James is also very passionate about missions, particularly the country of Guatemala, where he is part of a leadership team of a missions agency called Encuentro Missions, which serves mostly Latin America, but James particularly is kind of the leader of the group that serves in Guatemala and leads mission trips there every year. And so James, that's introduction. Just so a confession real quick, I don't know James at all. Never met James. Actually, I found him on Facebook. Because did you guys know that the most popular name in North America for men is the name James Smith? And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go on Facebook, I'm going to search the name James Smith, and I'm going to find one that nobody else in the church knows, or at least they're not mutual friends with. That was actually kind of challenging, because there's at least 2 in the Ohio County area, maybe 3 in Ohio County that are named James Smith, and you guys all know them. And then there's also others around that somehow you guys are friends with, but nobody's friends with James Smith in Mount Vernon, Ohio, okay? So I chose James Smith. He's just a random guy on Facebook. And I spent about 10 minutes looking at his profile, and I came up with quite a few things. If James Smith walks in today, I could talk to James Smith, right? And James Smith would be absolutely creeped out by me. Because I could say, hey, James, man, how's it going at Mount Vernon? I mean, I know you did that big youth thing just a few weeks ago. How many kids came to Christ at that event? And James would be like, he'd tell me, and he'd be like, well, who is this guy, right? And how'd your latest sermon go, James? I can talk to him about his kids, right? I mean, Finn they adopted Finn several years ago, and so Finn, I could talk to him about Finn and how's that adjustment going. When kids are adopted, a lot of times they have some struggles as they get a little bit older, and Finn's, about 8 years old, and so how's Finn adjusting to all that? And James would be able to tell me about that, right? I could talk to him about his older daughter who's in her preteen years. And Haley, how's Haley doing with adjustment in her school? I could talk to him about a lot of creepy things, right? Just from his Facebook wall. Like, you guys realize, like, I know a lot about James, right? But I don't really know James. I don't really know him, right? The psychologists, clinical psychologists, use terms and to kind of understand these particular ways we know people. They use the terms personal knowledge and impersonal knowledge. They would say that most of the relationships in your life are impersonal relationships. You know people impersonally, which means that they're acquaintances. You know things about these people. You may have interacted with them at different levels, right? Most of your Facebook friends are impersonal relationships. You don't really know them. You just know about them, right? Then there's the personal relationships. The personal relationships are when we actually know someone. How do you know that you know someone? To actually know someone means we actually have to engage with a person. We have to communicate with them for a period of time. We have to get to know about them, right? When we see aspects of someone's true heart, what makes them tick, what makes them who they are, then we can really say we know them, right? You guys have relationships like this. You have relationships like this with your significant other. You have relationships like this with your moms, your dads. You have relationships like this with your family members outside of just the immediate family. You have relationships like this with friends, right? Where you really know this person, right? You know what makes them happy. You know what makes them sad. You know, if I were going back to James, if I sat down with James and actually started asking him questions and listening to his responses, I could begin to get to really know James, right? If I asked him about the country of Guatemala, I'm sure James would have a lot to share about his heart for the people of Guatemala. I can get an aspect of his heart towards Guatemala, but when I hear him talk about it, when I hear his heart and hear the stories that he would share and how he shares those stories, I would get a picture of James's heart for Guatemala, right? When I talk to James about his kids, right, and I talk to him about his passion for adoption as they've adopted their son Finn, like I could hear his heart for adoption, why that adoption is so significant for him. When I talk to him about his job, right, I mean, he's been at the same job for over 11 years in a variety of different positions, and if you look at his Facebook wall, that's the majority of his posts are about his kids or about his job, right? And so if I was to talk to him about that, I would probably hear the passion he has for the students about Mount Vernon Nazarene College, right? I would hear about his passion for getting more kids to come so that they can have an experience like he had when he was an undergrad at the college, right? And then I would start to, as I spent time with him, I would start to really get to know who he really is, right? Not just this idea I have about him. Like, I kind of have some ideas. Like, he's probably a guy I could hang out with, right? He likes to hike. I'm not a big hiker. Actually, I don't really like bugs. Not a big fan of like ticks and stuff. I know you guys, like the dudes in the room, are like, golly, he's such a wuss. I am a wuss. When it comes to ticks, I don't dig them. And spiders, no way. I don't care about snakes. There's no snake that's really going to hurt me around here except copperhead, and I'll be all right with that. But I don't like spiders, and I don't like ticks, okay? And I don't like sweating very much, okay? Like in the wilderness. Like if I'm working on something, I'm fine with it. But just walking around sweating, that's not exciting to me. Definitely don't like to stay outside, like sleep outside. So James and I wouldn't get along there. It's assuming. I don't know James again very well, but I'm off track. But what I am saying is, like, as you get to know someone, you know that person on a personal level. We haven't even gotten to the Bible yet, right? That's what this series is all about. This series is all about meeting and encountering the real Jesus. Encountering the real Jesus. How do you know who Jesus is? Well, he tells you. In 7 different verses, 7 different passages in the book of John, Jesus says of himself, I am, right? He says, I am the bread of life. He says, I am the good shepherd. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He says, I am the door. We're going to get to that one. That one's kind of like, what are you talking about? He says, I'm the resurrection and the life, right? Jesus defines himself for us. And so we're going to look at each one of these I am statements over the next 7 weeks. And we're going to ask the question, who is the real Jesus? What can we learn about him? And really, what can we learn about ourselves as we encounter the real Jesus? And that's the question we're asking today, those two questions. What can we learn about us, and what can we learn about Jesus? The first question is, what can we learn about us? We're going to look at, starting in verse 22 of chapter 6, and we're going to look at the majority of chapter 6 in some form or fashion. Some we're going to look at deeply, and some we're going to just kind of glance over and kind of talk about in reference to. But ultimately, we're going to cover most of the chapter 6 of John, which is a very long chapter, right? If you guys look at it, it goes, I think there's 71 verses in chapter 6 of John. So it's a big chapter, but we're not going to read all of it today, okay? But I would encourage you guys to go back and read that entire chapter, because I think it will be a great study for you to look at the chapter 6 of John. But let's start off in John chapter 6, verse 22. It says, "On the next day, the crowd remained on the other side of the sea, or the crowd that remained on the other side of the sea saw that there had been only one boat there, and that Jesus had not entered the boat with his disciples, but his disciples had gone away." We start in the middle of a story, right? You guys never like starting a movie in the middle of a movie, right? So we kind of have to figure out like what's going on in this story, right? You ever started a movie in the middle of the movie and thought, I have no clue what's going on, right? And it takes you a little bit or maybe you never really understand where that character was ever introduced, right? Well, that's what's happening here. So let's go back a little bit and figure out who we're talking about here. There's a couple of different people or different groups mentioned in this. The first is the crowd, right? It says, on the next day, the crowd that remained on the other side of the sea saw that only one boat was there, or there had only been one boat here, and that Jesus had not entered the boat with his disciples, but his disciples had gone away alone. The crowd he's talking about is the crowd from the first part of chapter 6. You guys probably have heard this story before, right? The account of Jesus feeding 5,000 people. Let me just give you a little real quick. Jesus is about 2.5, almost 3, or starting the third year of his ministry. So just over 2 years. He's starting the third year of his ministry. So he's completed 2 years of his ministry, of the 3 years of ministry Jesus has on this earth. And so he's walking, he's going from town to town. He's teaching, he's healing, he's doing all the things that Jesus did. And he has gathered quite a large following of people. Particularly at this particular moment, there's 5,000 men following Jesus. See, the way they counted in the olden days is they only counted the men. That's not a sexist comment, just the way they did it, okay? So it says that there's 5,000 men, which means there's probably equally 5,000 women, and there's potentially at least one child for each one. 3 times 5 is 15. I'm pretty good at that kind of math, not anything beyond that. But 15,000 to 20,000 people are following Jesus, and they're all standing there listening to Jesus all day long. And that's where we catch him in the first part of chapter 6. And so Jesus turns to his disciples. He's been teaching all day long. He's probably famished. The group that's listening, if you ever listened to someone teach all day long, if you've stayed awake that long, you can't even stay awake for 30 minutes, some of you. I know you people too. So he's been teaching all day long, and so they're hungry. And so Jesus says, we need to feed them. We need to have some dinner. And his disciples are like, well, Jesus, we can't do that. I mean, goodness gracious, there's 20,000 people out here. How are we going to even feed any of them? And so we need to send them back home and let them take care of themselves, right? And then one of the other disciples said, Jesus is like, hey, Jesus, I mean, if we worked for 8 months, we couldn't pay for even a small amount of food for everybody to get a bite of something. I mean, this is ridiculous, right? He says 800 denarii wouldn't buy enough food for these people, right? That's 8 months of labor, right? And so he's like, we can't do that. And then one of them says, well, Jesus, we can take care of ourselves, because this little boy, we can take his fish and his bread and take care of ourselves, right? I don't know if you've ever read it like that, but that's kind of what they're doing. They're like, hey, this guy, his mom packed him an ancient Lunchable, and so we're going to take his Lunchable and we're going to take care of it ourselves, right? And so needless to say, they weren't necessarily thinking at the scope of Jesus, right? So Jesus says to them, hey, listen, let me have the bread and the fish. Boy, I'm not going to take your lunch. Just take care of it. Just understand what's happening here. And Jesus prays over the food. Let me just, real quick caveat. this is where our tradition of praying before our meals, this is kind of where I look at it starting. Jesus prayed over the meal and asked God's blessing and thanked God for the meal, and then he ate of the meal and distributed it. Like when you pray before your meals, you're not actually praying like God's blessing over the food. Like if you go to McDonald's and you order a Big Mac and a large fry, God can't do a lot with that. It's going to have artery problems, okay? That is what it's going to do. Like you can't say, God bless this food for the nourishment of our body. God's going to say, I gave you other food to choose from. This is not the one I would choose, you know. But it's also not like if you eat a French fry as you're driving away and you didn't pray for that French fry, it's not like that thing's cursed inside of your belly, right? Sometimes we think that way. We make jokes. Oh, you didn't pray for your food before you ate it. I'm not going to get food poisoning. I mean, it's not like foodborne illness just exists before a prayer and it doesn't exist after a prayer, okay? Just so you know, we're thanking God for our food just like Jesus did, okay? Off track. I'm back on now. So Jesus prays for the food, and then he starts distributing the food to the people, right? And what happens? Everybody gets full. It says that everybody got full off of what Jesus gave them. And not only did everybody get full, but there was leftovers afterwards, right? This was one of the first signs that Jesus has. John talks about 7 I am statements. He also shares 7 signs that Jesus does. And these signs are to point to his divinity, to point to who he is, right? The first one is when Jesus makes the water into the wine, right? And one of the other ones is when Jesus heals heals a woman, right? And so Jesus heals and he turns water into wine. And in this one, he feeds 5,000 people, right? And there's other signs that Jesus does throughout the book, and John will mark them. This is a sign that Jesus did. What that sign is an indication of who Jesus was, right? And so this was intended for a purpose, to show who Jesus was, particularly that Jesus is the sustainer of life. He will take care of his people, that he will provide them with what they need, right? And that's kind of the message in some ways what the people got, right? Because so they wake up the next morning, and that's where we catch up on our story. The next morning, so real quick, there is a caveat to the story, right? Jesus goes off because the people want to crown him king. Jesus says they don't want to crown me king for the right reasons. We're going to find that in a minute. So Jesus goes off, and then his disciples, for whatever reason, get in a boat and they go across the Sea of Galilee, leaving Jesus behind. I guess that's what he wanted them to do. And so they go on before Jesus, but then they get kind of caught up in some waves. And then you see the story, the little account in verses 16 through 21. There's a bigger account in Matthew where Jesus walks on the water, right? And that's what happens. That's why Jesus isn't there the next morning. Jesus walks out to the boat, gets on the boat with the other disciples, and then they go on to the Sea of Galilee, or they go on across the Sea of Galilee to a city called Capernaum. And so this is where we catch our story. And it says of them, they said that Jesus had not entered the boat with the disciples, but the disciples had gone away alone. Other boats from Tiberias came near the place where they had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. Here we find our first lesson, okay? In this sentence, we find our first lesson of who we are. And this is really who we are. What we learn about ourselves is we are on a search for lasting satisfaction. Each and every person in this room is on a search for lasting satisfaction. We all want it. We all desire it. How do we see it in this story? Look at this. They get up the next morning. Their bellies are no longer full from the food they had before. So they get up. They don't see Jesus. They see the boats from Tiberias, and they came near to the place where they had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. So when the crowd saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they themselves got into the boats and went to Capernaum seeking Jesus. Let me give you a picture here. Say there's half the crowd, right? Maybe half the crowd was full, and they said, we need to go home and work this week. So we had 20,000, now we're down to 10,000. Even if it was a quarter of the crowd, I can do that math too. That's 5,000 people. Still, 5,000 people. I don't know if you've ever seen boats from the ancient days. It's not like they would have like multiple decks like we have cruise ships today, right? That would hold thousands of people. You would have small boats, right? And so even if it was a quarter of the group, this was a big undertaking for them to get across the Sea of Galilee, wasn't it? They said, man, we got to go find this Jesus because he filled up our bellies with that fish and that bread, and that was some good stuff. We don't know what he has in store for us next. Maybe he's going to do some kind of sheep kebabs tomorrow. Like, we got to figure this out. Maybe he got some green peppers, cut them guys up. He's going to roast them over a charcoal fire. He's going to make some good food. So we got to find him again, right? We got to get filled. It's almost lunchtime. And so they gather everybody up. This was a huge undertaking. Kids in, women in, men in, everybody pile in these boats. Let's go across the Sea of Galilee. It's a pretty big body of water. Let's go across the Sea of Galilee. All right, everybody off, one at a time. Hey, kids, don't run, don't play. Like, this is a big undertaking, right? They have a lot to do to get everybody off the ships, on the ships, off the ships, and back into Capernaum, right? This is a huge undertaking that indicates that there is a search for satisfaction in the hearts of each one of these people. They're longing for something, right? And they're going and taking great lengths to get that something. And each person in this room is longing for something, for satisfaction, for fulfillment in your life, right? It comes in the form of hunger. We're hungry. And we want to be filled up with something, right? I mean, hunger is a passionate thing, is it not? I mean, if you've ever been hungry, I'll go a long way to find something good to eat. I mean, you ever drove to Owensboro just to find some kind of Asian food that you can eat that's delicious? It used to be Tokyo, and I know everybody's like, oh, Tokyo. You used to go all the way to Owensboro for Tokyo. It's really good. Andy and I loved it. We were really sad to see it go. I think something else is coming in there, but I don't really care that much. But anyway, you've been long ways to find something to eat, right? And you go out of your way to find something to eat. Don't let any of my daughters get hungry. If either of them get hungry, they're entirely too much to deal with. And so I'll go on great lengths to make sure their hunger is met. My wife, too, just don't tell her I said that, okay? But you go for great lengths to try to find something to quench our hunger, right? And the same thing is happening here. So they get to Jesus and they say, Jesus, where did you go? Rabbi, which means teacher, where did you go? You see that in the next verse? When they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, Rabbi, when did you come here? They're just seeking him out, right? And it's a pretty simple question, right? If I came in here, hey, when did you guys get here? I got here right at 9:30 or just before 9:30. For some of you, I got here about 9:45. But it was a pretty easy question, right? I mean, doesn't require a very long response, but Jesus never has an easy answer to questions. His answers always go deeper than we ever wanted to go, right? And that's exactly what happens. And we start to see the second thing we learn about ourselves, right? We misunderstand our true need. We are all searching for lasting satisfaction, but we all misunderstand our true need. In the same way, these people misunderstood their true need. They came to Jesus as a teacher. They've got something to learn from Jesus. They got something to get from Jesus, right? They don't see him as Lord. They don't see him as Savior. They don't see for who he really is, right? As that miracle that he had just performed the day before was all about. They didn't see him for who he really was. They saw him for what they could get out of him. And Jesus points that out right away, right? Look at verse 26. It says, Jesus answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. You saw me you're seeking me out not because you saw signs, that's what indications of who I really am, but because of what you can get out of me. A full belly. A good meal. If the bread and the fish were anything like the wine, it was great bread and it was really good fish, right? They said of the wine that Jesus brought to the wedding, he said, why did they save the best wine for the later in the meal when the waiter in the party than serving that first and the junk wine at the end? Jesus makes good things. And so they were filled up. They were satisfied. And they wanted more of it. And Jesus knows they wanted more of it. See, we misunderstand our true need. See, Jesus says, you are looking for me for the wrong reasons. Their response points straight to the motivations of their heart. See, they miss the person for the product. They miss the giver for the gift. The crowd says, it's not, Jesus says of the crowd, they're not seeking him, they're seeking what he offers them. And the miracle that was put on display the day before was for the glory, the magnificence, the wonder of God and Jesus, to point to him, not to the food that they were looking for. Jesus says, you need to stop working so hard. Look at that. He says, do not labor for food that perishes, but for food that endures to eternal life, that which the Son of Man will give you, for on him God the Father will set his seal. Jesus says you're looking for the wrong thing. You've misunderstood your true needs. You came to me looking for food, but what you really need is food that's not going to leave you hungry anymore. You need to stop looking for things that are just going to fill your need for a moment. You know, that job, it's going to fulfill your need for a moment. That new relationship is going to fill your need for a moment. That new car is going to fill your need for a moment. That baby that you are desiring so much for, which is a huge blessing, is only going to meet your need for a moment. And then there's going to have to diaper them, and you're going to have to feed them, and it's going to be a struggle. But nonetheless, there's still a blessing. But it ain't your eternal fulfillment, is it? That website you're going to over and over again is just meeting that lustful need for a moment. That girl you're flirting with at work, or that man you're flirting with at work, is just going to meet your need for a moment. That pursuit after pursuit after pursuit, that next drink, that next hit, whatever it is only going to meet your need for a moment. And it just points to a deeper need that we all have for true satisfaction. Third thing we learn about ourselves is we work really hard for things that perish. Let me just give you guys some statistics real quick. Consumer debt in America this last year almost reached $4 trillion. Trillion dollars. That's like 1,000 billion, which is like 1,000 million. I don't need to go any further. I think you guys know that a million is 1,000 thousands, right? So $1 trillion, $4 trillion of consumer debt. Of that, 1.02 trillion is in credit card debt. These cards in our pockets, it gets us, it's like vacations, right? I mean, I can put that on a credit card. It's like, you know, we got to have a new refrigerator. I got to put that on a credit card, right? I mean, I got to have the new clothes or the new games or the new whatever it is. I'll put that on this is actually not a credit card. That's a debit card. But this one's a credit card. But I got to put that, to swipe that thing, because then I can get what I need. But we've misunderstood our need, right? And we're pursuing things that perish. Auto loans total $1.113 trillion in 2018. If I just get this new car, then I think I'll be happy. It's just this one isn't meeting the needs anymore. There were, in 2014, I didn't look up the newest numbers, but in 2014 there were 1.7 billion searches for pornography. In just 1 year, 1.7 billion searches for pornography-related websites in 1 year. And that grows every year. It's probably well over 2 billion now. About 2 million children are exploited every year in global commercial sex trade. That should break our hearts. But the more we pursue pornography, the more that number will continue to grow. Because there's still a hunger for it in our culture. More than 1/3 of the U.S. adults are obese. I'm one of them. So I'm not like pointing fingers. That points to our hunger that we're trying to meet in food. In the U.S. alone, an estimated 54 million people over the age of 12 have used prescription drugs for non-medical reasons in their lifetime. Listen, that might not sound like a lot, but 54 million people over the age of 12, so 12 to death, have used prescription drugs for non-medical reasons. That's not counting heroin or crack cocaine or marijuana or anything else, any illegal drugs. It's just counting legal prescription drugs, but for non-medical use. 54 million people have used them in their life. I've used non-medical or prescription drugs for medical use. Many of you have, but 54 million have used them for non-medical use. All these numbers are pointing to the fact that we are hungry people. Looking for money, looking to sex, looking to drugs, looking to food, looking to a variety of other things to fulfill a deep need in our hearts. And we're pursuing it with all the effort that we can have. How many marriages have been ruined because the pursuit of success in business, success in work, having more stuff, more toys, more experiences for your kids, or whatever it might be. We are hungry people. And see, the numbers inside and outside the church are not that dramatically different. We say we know Jesus, but we are looking to other things in this world to satisfy us when we are left thirsty and hungry all the same. See, our pursuit points to our desire for an eternal satisfaction. And Jesus says these people 2,000 years ago, they're having the same struggle that we're having here today. In some ways, there's just more things to pursue in our life, right? They didn't have the internet, they didn't have cars, they didn't have a lot of the stuff that we have, so we just have more things to pursue today, more things to get off track in pursuing something that's never going to satisfy. Jesus says, do not labor for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. For on him the God the Father will set his seal. Then they said to him, what must we do to be doing the works of God? Jesus answered them, this is the work of God, that you believe in him who sent me. Now we start learning about who Jesus is. We've learned about ourselves, right? Now we need to learn about who Jesus is. And what do we learn about Jesus in this passage? The first thing we learn about Jesus is that Jesus is the end of our search. Jesus is the end of our search, right? They asked Jesus, what must we do to get this? I mean, what do we got to do to get the bread, Jesus? Right? The crowd wanted to do what they needed to do to get more food, better living conditions, maybe a few toys, and some security in their life, right? It's all what the American dream offers. What do I need to do? How many times do I need to go to church? How much Bible do I need to memorize? Do I send my kids on Sundays and Wednesdays? Is that necessary? Give me a tangible number of hours of prayer I need in a week. What am I not supposed to do? Okay, I don't like to smoke anyway, so that one's good. Drinking? Oh, I'm going to do that on the weekends, but I won't do it on Sundays. Is that cool? Like, I'll do like these things and I'll measure up, right? And then you'll bless me with all that I need. And Jesus says, this is the work. This is the thing you need to do. If you're looking for something and you're searching all kinds of different things to find what you're longing for, the crowd says, what do we need to do? And Jesus says, believe in me. That's it. That's the work of God. Rest in me. Receive me. This believe word, we think it's a cognitive response. It's not a cognitive response. It's an actual trusting, a believing, a putting faith in. It's a relying on Jesus. It's not just a cognitive response like, oh yes, I believe in Jesus. He is true. The devil does that. We've talked about that before. The devil believes in Jesus and the demons shudder at the thought of him. But it doesn't mean that they respond to him in faith and reliance upon him and asking the question of what do you want from me, right? It's not just a cognitive response. It's believing in Jesus. Believing Jesus is enough. He is all you need, right? But see, they miss it again. Again, they say to him, so then they said, what sign do you do that we might see you and believe you? What can you do to show us that this is real? And if I was Jesus, I would probably be like, I don't know what to do with you people. I just did something yesterday, and you forgot because your bellies aren't full anymore. That was pointing to who I am. I don't need to do anything else. I will, but I don't need to. Jesus says, so they say, what sign do you do that we might see and believe you? What work do you perform? Our fathers ate in the manna in the wilderness, as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. He says, but remember back when Moses, God says, I am the great I am. He said, then he brought us into the wilderness, he brought us out of Egypt, and then he gave them bread, and when they woke up in the morning, there was just bread there. Remember the manna? That's what we want. We want to show us a sign. Give us some bread. They're still focused on the hunger, right? What can we get out of this guy? This is a good sales tactic, right? Let's try this. Let's try this avenue. Be like Moses, because he really gave us tangible stuff. What's Jesus' response? Jesus says, truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And they said, Sir, give us this bread always. Give us this bread always. Hey, keep that coming like the manna did in the garden. And then Jesus responds, and we learn the second thing about Jesus. We learn first that Jesus is the end of our search, but then secondly, we learn that Jesus is what we truly need. Jesus is what we truly need, because Jesus says of himself, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. Jesus said, I am the bread you're seeking. I am in your work, in your toils, and in your jobs, and your pursuit of success. I am the bread you're seeking. In your family, and the success or health or security of your family, I am the bread you're seeking. In your finances, and making sure you have enough in the bank account, or enough in the retirement account, or enough to buy the toys that you desire, I am the bread you are seeking. In your relationships, and in those illicit relationships, or those relationships at home, those husbands and wives, those girlfriends, those boyfriends, and your future spouse, I am the bread you're seeking. They will never fulfill you, because they're going to leave you hungry yet again. They're going to leave you thirsty yet again. You're never going to have enough money. You're never going to have enough success. You're never going to have enough kids. Your kids are never going to be good enough. They're never going to live up to the expectations. They're going to meet your longings for them. Jesus said, do you really want a sign? Just think back. Be satisfied in me. Look back, Mark 6:42, right after they ate the bread and the fish, what does it say? They ate and they were satisfied. And there was abundance left over. They ate and they were satisfied. Stop looking elsewhere. Jesus is the bread that will leave you no longer hungry. That will never leave you thirsty, that will never leave you looking for the next thing that will satisfy you for a moment. And everything you're pursuing, everything our heart pursues, is only going to satisfy us for a moment. I have a friend who literally in the last 6 months last year has probably bought 3 different trucks. He went to the store, he got one truck, and he said, you know what, I just don't think this is what I need. And so he went and got a bigger truck. $60,000, $70,000 truck, and he said just charge it, right? But then that one got a little bit too much, and so he went back and he got a different truck. I think we're into 4 trucks now, actually, because he went and got a different truck, a newer truck, but then he couldn't afford the payments on that one, so he went back, traded that one in for a less expensive truck, but still a newer truck. And you see like this consistent racking on of more and more debt. And what it points to me is you're looking for something that's never going to fulfill you. That's the theme of our lives at times. But the third thing we learn about Jesus is the source of lasting satisfaction. He's never going to leave you hungry or thirsty. Jesus says in verse 48, I am the bread of life. The word he uses there is Zoe. Zoe. There it is, Zoe. Sorry, Greek words sometimes skip my mind. But there's the Greek language uses three words for life, and the two main ones it uses is bios, which you guys can probably figure out what that is. Bios is the word for biology, that what biology came, it's physical life. But then there's the word Zoe, which is eternal spiritual life, right? Life that's bigger, it's abundant life. It's bigger than just the physical life, right? And Jesus says, I am the bread of Zoe. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness and they died. This is the bread that comes down from heaven so that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. He will Zoe forever. And the bread that I will give for life of for the life of the world is my flesh. See, he says, your father, they ate the manna in the wilderness. You guys pointed that as a sign. They ate that bread in the wilderness and they died. See, the manna, it met their physical need, but not their eternal need. It sustained their life, their physical life. And it was brought to them every morning. And God even built that into it, right? It was brought to them every morning. But he told them, don't save any of it. Because if you do save any of it, it's going to rot and it won't be there the next day. He gave them a double portion on Saturday morning so they didn't have to worry, on Friday morning, because then whatever the Sabbath day was, they would get a double portion so they wouldn't have to go and gather it the next day. But he never gave them more. But then Jesus comes and he gives them the bread and the 5,000 people, they ate of it. And then what happened? They were full and there was leftovers. If that ain't a sign, I don't know what else you need. Jesus gives abundant bread. He fulfills our longings of our heart that you can never fill with anything else in this world. See, Jesus says of himself, I give you Zoe. See, even the Israelites, they understood. They got that this bread wasn't satisfying. It wasn't sufficient. Look at chapter 11 of Numbers. It'll be on the screen. It says this in verse 4 through 6. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving. The people that were with the Jewish people had a strong craving. And then it led to this. And the people of Israel also wept again and said, oh, that we may eat. Oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, and the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic, right? They start looking back at the slavery days. God had brought them out of Egypt where they were slaves, building bricks, building these clay bricks and stacking them, these huge bricks on top of one another over and over again. And then they get to go home and they get food, right? And all they can remember is the leeks and the onions and the cucumbers. I don't even like cucumbers. That's all they could think about, right? Because they knew that this manna, they said, but now our strength is dried up and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. God met their physical need, but they had an even deeper need, right? And he was going to meet that in Christ Jesus, but they lost focus, they lost perspective. How often do you lose perspective? Every day you wake up and you go on this search for significance or for satisfaction in something that's going to leave you hungry. Fast forward thousands of years later, people haven't changed at all. In Jesus' day, they haven't changed, and they haven't changed today. And Jesus says, I am the bread of Zoe. I'm the bread of eternal, abundant life that's never going to leave you hungry, never going to leave you thirsty, never going to leave you longing for another meal, because it's going to fill you up. We are hungry for something that will never fill us up and leaves us hungry again and again. And Jesus says, I am the living bread. If anyone eats of this bread, he will Zoe forever. So how can we find true satisfaction? how can we put this into action, right? Because that's really what we're all asking. Okay, that's all sounds good, but how am I satisfied in Jesus? Well, first and foremost, if you're sitting in this room today and you're a fan of Jesus, meaning that he sounds like a pretty good guy, and all this church stuff, it's really good for you. I think it's important for us to come to church, and the Bible is a good book, and I think there's some good information in it. And I always vote Republican or Democrat because that's what Jesus would want me to do. And I try not to drink too much, and I try not to smoke, and I try not to cuss in certain groups of people. Like, I try to be a pretty good person because I think that's what Jesus would want me to do. If you're a fan of Jesus, then you haven't received him as the bread of life. So if you want true satisfaction in your life, you receive Jesus as the bread of life. Jesus says in John 6:53-55, Jesus says, and truly, truly I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. That really offended them because they thought, man, you got to eat of his flesh and drink of his blood? That's some kind of crazy thing, isn't it? What Jesus was saying is, you've got to receive me in my death, in my brokenness for your sin. You've got to receive me. You can't just be a fan. You've got to be a follower. You've got to be a follower of Jesus. He goes on, whoever feeds on my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, has Zoe. And I will raise him up on the last day, for my flesh is true food and my blood is true drink. Jesus will meet your needs. Don't just be a fan of Jesus. Submit your heart to him. Receive him. Recognize him as your Savior above whatever else in this world you're looking for salvation. Your money ain't going to save you. Your family ain't going to save you. That relationship ain't going to save you. The success ain't going to save you. Retirement's not going to save you. That's not going to save you. Jesus will. Secondly, you have to pursue Jesus as the bread of life. He says in verse 66-67, after this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. So Jesus turned to the 12 and said, do you want to go away as well? There's a bunch of people, 20,000 people. I don't know how many people, maybe 12 are left. I don't know. A handful of people are left. Because what Jesus called them to do is to walk away from the pursuits of their life and to follow him. And they said, we can't do that. That's too hard. Pursuing Jesus isn't easy, but it's the only way to true life and satisfaction. So the disciplines of the faith: pursue Jesus in his word, pursue Jesus in prayer, pursue Jesus in serving his church. The mission and the purpose of our faith, to embrace the mission and the purpose of our faith. A few weeks ago, we gave you guys these cards, and on one side of the card it says, people I commit to pray for over the next 40 days to invite them to Resurrection Sunday service in 2019. See, this is the mission of God. This is what God wants for our lives. He wants us to pour out ourselves that others may know Jesus, right? That we are so encapsulated with who Jesus is, so in awe of who he is, that we would be driven to lead others to him. I challenged the youth group with this last Wednesday that to go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We have the opportunity to pray. This is just a simple invite. Hey, would you come with me to our Easter service? We're not trying to pad our numbers so we can look good. We're trying to let people hear about the resurrected Christ, right? And so if they hear about the resurrected Christ where life is found, then we trust that Jesus will save them from their sin and set them free to live an eternal, abundant life in him. Pursue Jesus and his will for your life. Align your will. Ask God to align your will with his will. Not just to bless the things that you're pursuing in your life. Jesus says to them in verse 34 of chapter 4, after he's had this interaction with the woman at the well, he said, his disciples come, hey, Jesus, you need to eat some food. You haven't eaten in a while. And then Jesus says, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. That's the bread that Jesus lives off of. Pursue him. I've had conversations the last several weeks with people who have begun to really pursue Jesus, engage in his word. Pursue him in prayer. Ask the question of what do you want from me, not what do I want for myself or for my family. And these are the comments I've gotten. I've had people say to me, my whole focus has changed. Like my wife is saying things about me and how I'm acting that's different. And it's not because I'm trying harder. It's just because I'm pursuing Jesus more. He's becoming more real to me. I'm watching TV and things on TV are offending me that never offended me before. Because Jesus is better. He sounds better. His ways are better. It's not like it's like a two-step. I can't give you 10 steps to a better life with Jesus. You just got to pursue Him. Make Him the pursuit of your life, not something else. And finally, we rest in Jesus as the bread of life. Can you say what Peter says in verse 68 and 69? Simon Peter answered him after he turns to him and says, "Are you going to go away as well?" Simon Peter answers him, "Lord, to whom shall we go? Who are we going to go to? Because you alone have the words of eternal life. And we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God." Is Jesus the source of your eternal satisfaction? Or are you just a fan? Is He the source of your eternal satisfaction? Or are you just a fan? Can you answer with Peter and say, "We got nowhere else to go, Jesus, because you have the words of Zoe, of true abundant life"? We have an opportunity to respond. We do this every week because we believe that God's word wants us, desires us, and even calls us to respond. And so if you are here today, and you are, because I see you, I'm calling you to respond. Respond in some way. Maybe it's responding in your seat. Maybe it's simply bowing your head and praying. Maybe it's singing loud as we sing this next song. Or maybe it's coming forward and praying at the altar or seeking prayer from me or someone else. But respond in some way. If you've never trusted in Jesus, your response today is to receive Him truly as the bread of life. I know there's folks in this room today that are looking at their life, and I pray that the Lord would make you uncomfortable with where you're at today. That you'd be uncomfortable sitting in your seat saying, He's not the bread of my life. And that you would pray and receive Him as Lord, as Savior, as the satisfaction that He will give you. If you have trusted Jesus, if you walked with Him, and yet you know that your life is not in pursuit of Him, then I pray that your prayer is, God, convict me and lead me to repentance and put my life in line with you. What's your distraction? What's the thing you're pursuing? And give that up to the Lord today. Let's bow our heads. Let's pray as we respond. Lord Jesus, thank you for your grace. Thank you for this message of hope that we have in your word. God, thank you that you are the bread that never leaves us hungry. God, help us to see the emptiness and the vanity even of the pursuits we have in our lives. And God, help us, God, to embrace the truths of the cross, the truths of Christ, the true bread that will never leave us hungry again. God, for anybody in this room that has never trusted in you, I pray right now, God, that you would make them uncomfortable, God, and that you would lead them, Father, to pray in repentance of you. God, simply pray, I realize I'm a sinner and I'm in need of a Savior and I can't save myself. And so, Jesus, would you save me out of my sin and set me free to live for you? Whatever way you pray that prayer, Jesus knows it. Jesus understands it. And the promise is that when we trust in Jesus, when we confess Him with our mouths and believe in Him with our hearts, that He will save us. So we rest in that salvation. And God, I just pray that you would move in the hearts of your people, God, to lead them to pursue you. And God, and to rest in Jesus as the bread of life. We ask all this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. Let's stand together. Let's sing and let's